I was told I could do a reading, but I think that's boring. So I'm going to just talk to you about how I feel about what has taken place today and what continues to take place when marginalised writers write. I think it was Winston Churchill who said, history is written by the winners. He actually said, history is written by the victors. I'm saying history is written by the winners. It's written by those in power. History is written by those who take or are given the pen. And it's also written from a point of view. It's written from that person that wrote it, or the victor's point of view, even when the victor's trying to be objective, and that isn't always the case. So history is therefore partly fiction. And even when the writer tries to be objective, we all come to writing with our own prejudices, with our views on life, with our background, with all the things that have ever happened to us informing what we do. So history then will tell us what it wants to tell us and what the victor wants us to know. And when future generations read history, they read that view, especially if there's no one there to contradict it. And as much as we have academia, we have historians, we have essays, we also have fiction, what people call the canon. And so we have Thackeray and Dickens and Chaucer and lots of other people telling us what history was like, what history was about. And in those days, and still today, if you couldn't write your piece of history, your view of history, if you couldn't write about what happened to your life with your opinions in it, then no one got to hear them. No one gets to hear them. If you didn't learn to read or write, we've only had universal education for just over 100 years. If you didn't learn to read or write, because you'd never been to school, if you didn't have access to books or libraries, if you didn't have time after an 18-hour day or working 3 jobs to sit down and write, then you weren't included in history. Your views weren't included in history. You weren't one of the winners that got to write. And I'm not talking here about, Churchill was talking about the battleground, but I'm talking about everyday life. I'm talking about how people are portrayed who live on the margins. David Cameron said in one of his many speeches before he sold us down the river, that council estates were breeding grounds of vice and crime. He spoke about getting rid of them, how bad they were, how there was a lack of community, and thereby talked about the people that live on those estates. Thousands of people, millions of people that live on those estates. Newspapers today depict people on benefits as scroungers and thieves, and that's been kind to some of the newspapers. I've called them newspapers. I don't actually think they are newspapers. I think they're toilet paper. But anyway, television regularly shows us a diet of poverty porn. Look how those people live, look what they eat, look what they do, look what they wear. They. This isn't us, this is they. Reality TV likes nothing better than following someone around who has a mental illness and see what they get up to. Let's see what they hoard. Let's see what they eat as they eat themselves to death. Let's see how they have children too young. Let's see what they wear to get married. Let's see how they behave in public. Let's observe them. Let's judge them. Are they portraying those people as life's winners? That includes me. That includes where I come from. That includes many of you here. And part of the reason that they can look from the outside in is because diversity has become synonymous with there being a norm. Here's the norm, in the middle of a spoke of a wheel, and here's all the strands that come away from the norm, this fixed point of what it is to be normal, and anything that isn't comes off it, goes away from it. In reality, and I do think it's reality, life isn't like that. That's not diversity. That's real life, real people, you, me, and us, the majority, are not spokes off a wheel. We are much more like stars or planets, a constellation, ever moving, ever changing. Our identities change, our lives changes, and even people who see themselves as the middle, at the centre of things, their life changes. We all started life as a child, a vulnerable child. All children are vulnerable, and we became older. If we are lucky, we will reach old age, and that is lucky to reach old age. We may die before, but if we're lucky enough to become an old person, we will have the vulnerabilities that come from being an old person. We may have ill health. We may get a disability. We may experience loneliness. We may experience isolation. And anyone who thinks they're in the middle of the fixed wheel and the norm, who thinks that's not coming, they're wrong. It comes to all of us, again, if we are lucky. We may develop, or we may have, a mental impairment. We may have a hidden impairment, something that we don't talk about and we think no one knows, something we're ashamed of. We may struggle with self-confidence, with crowds, with personal relationships. Anyone in the middle of that fixed wheel who thinks there is a norm can have any of those things happen to them. That is diversity, that it happens to all of us. It can happen to all of us. We may have a disability that just makes life bloody hard, and there's no name for it. And it just affects us every single day. And there are people here today that have overcome a lot just to get here, who are sitting here knowing that it's very hard for them. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Well done. So we may become different to who we are now. We may one day find the confidence to embrace a new sexuality, for example, take a new partner, become a new woman or a new man. We may adopt a sexuality that for now there is no name. We may experience marginalisation from society, from that norm, that mythical norm, in ways that other people can't understand and ways that just make us feel different. And as well as those sometimes being difficult, those differences are beautiful and exciting, and they give us meaning to our lives, and they add texture and joy to our lives. Some of the things we very rarely see on television when they are talking about diversity, that the beauty of who we are and the beauty of our differences and the joy that that brings us. Who's going to talk about the beauty and who's going to talk about the joy? Who's going to write history if we don't do it? If we don't deliver to the world an alternative narrative, an alternative norm, who's going to do it? We have to. We have to do it as writers. One day, today, will be the olden days. God knows what that'll be like with all the technology that's coming, probably lots of robots, I don't know. But it'll be a very, very different world. And our children and our grandchildren will be reading about today. History written by the victors. History written by the winners. What books will be on their shelves? What poems will they read? Will they only read the views of David Cameron, the TV companies, the fake news? Or will we, as writers, be able to tell our own stories in our own voices, with our own views, and tell it like it really was, really is? If they only read the voyeuristic sneering of the Daily Mail, might as well say it, if they read the fetishisation of the working classes, if they only read the views of the middle and the upper classes, what will our children know about today if we don't continue to write these narratives, alternative narratives, true narratives. So I'd like to say to all the writers here, congratulations on taking the pen, because it's never going to be given to you. You have to take it. You have to work really, really hard. It's never been more important to write your own history, to tell your own stories in your own words, and for us all to put our lives on the page and express ourselves, to tell our stories rather than have someone else tell our stories, because we are the winners when we tell our story. We become writers of history. So we need to speak of the lives we know and live every day, and let our experiences inform our stories. Now, that doesn't mean we have to always be writing about where we come from or the issue-based novel that sometimes publishers like to see, because we could be writing about science fiction or vampires or the past. We have a right to write about Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII. We have a right to write the Pride and Prejudice novel. We can write what we want, but all those writings will be informed by who we are and the truth of our existence, not filtered through someone else's eyes. So, take the pen. No one's going to give it to you. And the Creative Literary Awards this evening are celebrating everybody that does that. Thank you.